AITA for refusing to babysit the guests' kids when my parents hosted Easter. Every holiday I'm pressured into babysitting, but this time, it's going to be on my terms. I'm a 16-year-old girl and I'm still living at home with my parents. I'm writing this because something happened during Easter, and I honestly don't know if I handled it right or if I just made everything worse. I've been thinking about it non-stop since it happened and I keep going back and forth between feeling justified and feeling guilty. Maybe someone here can help me figure it out. So, some background: ever since I can remember, my family has always been the go-to host for every single holiday. I'm not exaggerating, literally every holiday. Christmas. At our house. Thanksgiving. At our house. 4th of July. Yep, at our house. And of course, Easter. My mom says it's because our house is central, whatever that means. She likes being the hostess, setting up themed decorations, making huge meals, coordinating potlucks, sending out invites weeks in advance. Our living room gets transformed depending on the holiday: plastic pumpkins and fake cobwebs for Halloween, red, white and blue everything for Independence Day, snowflake garlands and nativity scenes for Christmas. I'm not saying it's bad. It's nice. It makes the house feel alive. But here's the part that sucks. At every single one of these events, I've been the designated babysitter. And I don't mean someone asked me once and I offered to help. I mean it became this silent rule that everyone somehow agreed to, that I, a literal child myself, was responsible for watching everyone else's kids. I'm the oldest among the kids of the extended family and friend group, so I guess they just decided that made me the built-in childcare. It's been going on for years. I was 10, chasing around other 10-year-olds, wiping noses, and helping toddlers go potty. I missed out on desserts, board games, conversations. I didn't get to sit with the adults and hear the jokes or stories. I was always in the other room, building block towers or playing the same Peppa Pig video on loop to keep a screaming toddler calm. Nobody ever asked if I wanted to do it. Nobody ever offered me money. And, this part still stings, nobody ever even said thank you. I didn't get to enjoy the food while it was warm. I didn't get to sit and eat with everyone. I was always standing up, holding a kid on my hip, cutting up someone else's ham while mine got cold. And anytime something went wrong, like when a kid spilled juice or broke a vase, I'd get blamed because you were supposed to be watching them. Fast forward to this past Easter. My mom went all out again. She decorated the entire house with pastel garlands and bunny figurines. She baked 3 different types of pies. There were little jars of jelly beans on every table. We had 20 people coming over, including cousins, neighbors, and my parents' friends. And with them came 8 kids, all under the age of 10. Before people even had time to take off their coats, the first comment hit me. One of the moms, someone I barely know who always shows up with her twins and leaves the second they start crying, smiled at me and said, "The kids have been looking forward to seeing you. You've got your hands full today." And then she was off to pour herself a mimosa. I just stood there. Something in me snapped. I was 16, not 6. I had worked hard all week on school stuff, I was tired, and I wanted, for once, just once, to sit down with everyone else and enjoy a holiday. So I decided I wasn't doing it this time. I wasn't going to be the babysitter again. I told myself I was going to say no and stick to it. So when the next person approached me, Lindsay, a woman I've known since I was little, who's 34 and has 2 of the wildest kids imaginable, and she said, "Hey, can you take the kids out to the backyard for a bit so we can get food set up?" I smiled and said, "I'm actually sitting with everyone this year." She paused like she didn't hear me right. I repeated myself, calmly, politely, but firmly. "I'm not watching the kids today. I'm just here to enjoy the holiday like everyone else." The look on her face was somewhere between confused and offended. She didn't respond, just gave this tight-lipped nod and walked off. And that's when the whispers started. I sat at the table with the adults while people filled their plates. A couple of the older women looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Someone muttered, "Must be nice to be too good for family duties." Lindsay walked by and actually said under her breath, "Well, someone's forgotten her place," and then, louder, "Teens these days have no sense of family." I didn't say anything. I just sat there and ate my food, trying to enjoy it even though I could feel everyone's eyes burning into me. Meanwhile, the kids were running wild. They were chasing each other through the hallway, yelling, laughing, and throwing things. At one point, someone's rubber dinosaur soared through the air and landed in the potato salad. One of the younger kids spilled juice all over the couch. Two toddlers were fighting over a toy and ended up crying so loudly it stopped the conversation at the table. No one was watching them. Literally no one. The parents were too busy talking, eating, or pretending not to hear the chaos. And I just sat there. For the first time in years, I did nothing. I didn't jump up to fix it. I didn't clean up. I didn't tell anyone to quiet down. I just let it happen. Eventually, Lindsay had to get up because her kids were crying and one had hit the other in the face with a plastic shovel. She looked furious. She stormed into the backyard, grabbed both kids by the arms, and started scolding them loudly while shooting death stares in my direction. As she was leaving, she looked right at me and said, "Thanks for ruining the holiday." And then she left, dragging her kids behind her. The rest of the day was awkward. A few other parents scrambled to control the kids, but most just looked annoyed, like it was my fault everything was out of control. My mom didn't say anything directly, but she gave me this disappointed look when she was cleaning up, and muttered something about not being able to rely on people anymore. Now I don't know. Part of me feels like I was right. I'm not a free babysitting service. I'm a guest too. I'm a kid myself, and I deserve to enjoy the holidays just like everyone else. But another part of me feels guilty because the day was a mess, and I know it wouldn't have been that bad if I had just done what I usually do. I could have kept the peace. I could have made it easier for everyone. But I'm tired. I'm tired of being expected to give and give and give, and never be seen or appreciated. I didn't ruin the holiday. I just refused to sacrifice mine again. So, am I the asshole? Update 1. So, I didn't expect to hear from her again. I figured Lindsay would be too busy complaining about me in group chats or whispering about my attitude to anyone who would listen. But instead, she actually called me. Not my mom. Me. Directly. I saw her name flash across my screen and honestly thought it was a mistake. I hesitated for a second, but I answered. And the first words out of her mouth were that I owed the family an apology. Not a conversation starter. Not a question. Just a demand. She said I owed everyone for my outburst on Easter. I blinked, confused, because I had absolutely no idea what she was even talking about. Outburst? I reminded her that I didn't yell. I didn't storm off. I didn't throw anything or slam a door. I didn't even raise my voice. I literally sat down, quietly, at the adult table like everyone else. That was my big offense. She launched into this long-winded monologue about how I let the kids run wild, how I abandoned my responsibility, and how I clearly didn't understand how families were supposed to work. She said, and I quote, that I needed to understand my role in the family ecosystem. Like I was some kind of cog in a machine whose only function was to absorb the mess and chaos created by other people's kids. She told me that I'm still a kid myself, and that being a helpful family member is my job. I sat there, stunned. I told her, calmly, that I was not a babysitter. I never signed up to be one. No one asked me if I wanted that responsibility. It was just dumped on me year after year with zero acknowledgement and zero appreciation. I told her that I didn't owe anyone anything, least of all an apology for wanting to enjoy a holiday that I had also helped set up and prepare for. She didn't like that. At all. Her voice got sharp, but I stayed calm. She called me selfish, entitled, ungrateful. I didn't respond to that. I just repeated that I was not the family's free childcare and that I was allowed to set a boundary. And that's when she hung up on me. I figured that was the end of it. It should have been. But no. She wasn't finished. About 20 minutes later, I started hearing voices coming from the kitchen. My mom was home, and someone was on speakerphone. It was Lindsay. Again. But this time, she was crying. She was telling my mom that I was disrespectful, that I had talked back, that I had ruined her Easter experience. She said her kids were miserable, that they had missed out on Easter egg hunts and games because I had refused to do my part. She spun it into this whole narrative about how she had just wanted a peaceful family gathering and how I had destroyed that by being difficult and uncooperative. She said I was acting out, and that my attitude was toxic for the family. I stood in the hallway and listened, stunned. I was ready for my mom to step in and defend me. I thought, after everything, she might finally say something like, "She's 16. She's not responsible for your kids." Or even just, "She's allowed to enjoy the holiday too." But that's not what happened. My mom didn't say any of that. She didn't defend me. She didn't push back. She just kind of nodded along. She kept her voice soft and sympathetic and said things like, "I know, I'm sorry," and then the worst one, "She's going through a phase." A phase. Like I had dyed my hair blue or decided I was into death metal or something. Like asserting basic boundaries and not wanting to be treated like a house elf was some temporary personality glitch that I'd snap out of if they just waited long enough. It felt like my stomach dropped. My own mom couldn't, or wouldn't, see the difference between standing up for myself and being difficult. I wasn't acting out. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I just wanted to sit down for once. To eat dinner. To laugh at a joke. To not have someone's toddler throwing chicken nuggets at my head while their mom drank wine in the other room. But now, according to Lindsay, I had ruined Easter. And my mom, instead of standing up for me, was smoothing it over by chalking it up to a phase. Like this was just teenage rebellion and not me trying to claw back a shred of autonomy in a house where everyone just assumed I'd take care of things no one else wanted to deal with. I walked away from the kitchen before they finished talking. I didn't want to hear any more. I didn't want to hear my mom say one more word to coddle a grown woman who cried because her 8-year-old had to be parented by her for one afternoon. I didn't want to hear her downplay my feelings just to keep the peace with someone who saw me as a tool rather than a person. That was infuriating. Update 2. I really thought the phone call would be the last of it. Or at the very least, the guilt tripping through my mom would be where it ended. I thought Lindsay would complain in group chats, ice me out at the next holiday, maybe throw a few passive-aggressive comments my way the next time we crossed paths. But no. I was wrong. So wrong. She didn't just stew in her anger or gossip behind my back like a normal petty adult. Lindsay took matters into her own hands. Literally. On a completely random Thursday afternoon, not a weekend, not a holiday, not even a particularly notable day, she showed up at our front door. No warning. No call. Nothing. And she wasn't alone. She had her 2 kids with her, both of them visibly miserable, one dragging a stuffed bunny by the ear, the other clutching a half-melted chocolate egg that was slowly coating his entire fist in sticky goo. Their faces were flushed, their hair unbrushed, and they looked like they'd been either crying or fighting in the car. Or both. I heard the doorbell and figured it was a package or one of the neighbors. My mom answered and was visibly stunned. Lindsay breezed in like she was walking into her own kitchen. She gave my mom a kiss on the cheek, overly sweet, like nothing awkward or dramatic had just happened between us 5 days earlier. Then she said in this sing-songy, too loud voice, "We just thought we'd recreate Easter a little, less chaotic this time. I brought snacks." She held up a grocery bag like she'd just won a prize on a game show. Her tone was so cheerful it felt like it was made of plastic. It made my skin crawl. I was standing by the stairs, still in my pajamas because I had gotten home from school early and planned to spend the afternoon doing absolutely nothing. I was halfway through reheating a slice of leftover pizza and scrolling on my phone when I saw her walk in. She made eye contact with me immediately. Her smile stretched wide across her face like it had been stapled there. Then she said, with way too much enthusiasm, "Maybe you can hang with the kiddos while we get things ready?" I just blinked at her. Get what ready? There was no party. No food in the oven. No family gathering planned. Just a random Thursday, a normal weekday, with no context for her showing up. My mom, still standing near the front door, looked completely thrown off. She stammered something about not expecting company, but Lindsay was already walking into the kitchen, opening cabinets, pulling out plates like she had been given permission. Then came the kicker. She unrolled a bright plastic playmat in the middle of our living room, scattered a handful of broken crayons and coloring books across it, and handed me a juice box. Not her kids. Me. She handed me a juice box and said, "You can start with some coloring while I unwind with your mom." It took me a second to realize she wasn't joking. I stared at her. Then I said, "No. I'm not babysitting." She didn't react. She just blinked at me, like the words didn't compute. So I said it again, louder this time. "No. I'm not babysitting." That time, she heard me. My dad, who had just walked in from work still wearing his jacket and holding his lunch bag, stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the scene. Me standing stiffly, Lindsay's kids already wrestling over a broken plastic truck, Lindsay humming in the kitchen like this was some kind of planned event. He looked around, took everything in, and very calmly but firmly said, "This isn't happening today. We didn't agree to this." And that was the moment she snapped. All the fake cheer evaporated like it had never existed. Her face twisted, her voice turned sharp, and the mask dropped completely. She said I was being selfish, that young people these days don't understand sacrifice, and that parenting doesn't come with breaks. She launched into this whole martyr monologue about how some of us don't get to opt out of responsibility just because we're tired or don't feel like it. Then, she looked my dad straight in the eye and said, "You need to discipline your daughter before she grows up to be completely useless." The room went completely silent. My mom froze. I felt my jaw clench so tightly it hurt. My dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue or try to reason with her. He just looked at her, stone-faced, and told her to leave. That set her off even more. She huffed, muttered something about entitled teenagers and spineless parenting, and then started loudly packing up her things. She moved like a performer on stage, narrating everything as she went. She told her kids in an exaggerated tone, "Come on, we're clearly not welcome here." She crammed the broken crayons into her bag like they had offended her personally. She knocked over the juice box on her way out. She made sure we all heard her when she said, "Some families just don't know how to support each other anymore." And then she left. The door closed with a final, heavy click, and the house went completely still. For a long moment, none of us moved. My dad set down his lunch bag and quietly went upstairs. I stayed frozen by the stairs, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. And my mom just sat down at the kitchen table, not speaking, not moving, just sitting there like someone had unplugged her. That was the moment I saw it click for her. The shock, the awkwardness, the disbelief, she was finally seeing Lindsay not as a harmless, quirky family friend, but as someone who had been taking advantage of her and treating me like a piece of unpaid furniture for years. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. I think that was the first time she saw Lindsay for who she really was. Update 3. About a week later, things escalated in the weirdest, most ridiculous way possible. I honestly thought we'd hit the peak of Lindsay's nonsense when she showed up at our door with her kids and a bag of pretzels like she was trying to throw an impromptu redemption Easter, but no. That was just the prelude. What came next was an actual smear campaign. It started with whispers. I noticed some distant relatives were suddenly colder in the family group chat. My mom got weirdly short responses when she mentioned anything I was doing, school events, piano recitals, little things like that. Then, out of nowhere, one of my old babysitters from years ago liked a bunch of random pictures on my Instagram and then unliked them all an hour later. I wouldn't have thought anything of it except the timing. Then the messages started. The first one was from a woman I didn't even know. Her profile said Carla, mutuals with a few family members. She sent me a whole paragraph in my DMs about how it's heartbreaking to see young people turning their backs on the values of community and empathy, and that abandoning children is never okay, no matter how difficult things are at home. It was surreal. I didn't even respond. I just stared at it, trying to figure out how this woman I had never met had formed a whole opinion about me. Turns out, Lindsay had been telling people that I had promised to babysit her kids on Easter. Not just that I was expected to, not that it had been the usual unspoken assumption, but that I had actually looked her in the eyes and agreed, then deliberately bailed. She told anyone who would listen that I was having some kind of teenage meltdown, that I stormed off to pout, that I left a group of children in danger. She used that word, danger. As if I had tossed her kids into the backyard and locked the door behind them. That was the final straw. I sat my parents down. I pulled out my phone, showed them every text I had with Lindsay. There were none about babysitting. None about Easter plans. Not even a vague hint of a request. Then I called Olivia, my cousin, who has her own long and colorful history with Lindsay. She'd been quiet during the original drama, mostly because she wasn't at Easter this year, but once I explained what was going on, she jumped into action. We started piecing together a history. Screenshot by screenshot. Message by message. Olivia had a thread from 2 years ago where Lindsay tried to drop her kids off at her house, just for a few minutes, and didn't come back for 3 hours. Another aunt remembered a pool party where Lindsay left her toddlers without telling anyone, and someone found them alone near the deep end while she was nowhere to be seen. A neighbor said she once showed up to a birthday party with her kids, dropped them off, and left to get her nails done. She didn't come back until the cake was being cut. My dad saw enough. He's not usually one for confrontation, but he made some phone calls. He invited a few people over for what he called a quick catch-up, family members and family friends who'd hosted events where Lindsay had pulled this same stunt. It was casual, but the conversation was deliberate. And once we all started sharing stories, it became painfully obvious that this was a pattern. Lindsay wasn't a stressed mom occasionally making mistakes. She was a serial boundary pusher. She expected everyone around her to act like she was the only one with problems and that her kids were everyone else's responsibility. The backlash was slow but steady. She wasn't invited to the next birthday party. One of her close friends posted a very vague but obviously pointed Facebook status about how some people treat friends like free daycares and then play the victim. Comments underneath were full of heart emojis and, "You said it, girl," replies. People were talking. Lindsay didn't post anything herself for days. Which, if you knew Lindsay, was unheard of. This woman normally uploaded Instagram stories about her morning smoothies and motivational quotes every 24 hours like clockwork. The silence was loud. And then, just when I thought she'd finally gotten the message and crawled back into whatever yoga studio parent Facebook group she came from, she showed up again. This time, no kids. No props. No fake cheer. It was late afternoon, just after school. She rang the doorbell, alone. Her face was tight, tired. She looked like someone who'd been up all night rehearsing a speech in her head. My mom opened the door, surprised but polite, and stepped outside. Lindsay immediately launched into her monologue. She said she'd heard people were talking behind her back and that she needed to clear the air. She insisted she wasn't trying to make enemies and that this had all gotten blown out of proportion. My mom just nodded, stayed polite, and told her, "This isn't a good time." Lindsay didn't even try to argue. She just stood there, breathing hard, staring through the doorway like she was calculating how to spin the moment. Then she looked directly at me, standing a few feet behind my mom, and said, "You think you've won, but don't forget you're just a kid. One day you'll need help, and no one will be there." That line might have scared me once. Not that long ago, it would have made me second-guess myself. It would have stuck to me like gum on the bottom of a shoe. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I just said, "I'll take that risk." She stood there for a second, clearly not expecting that. Then she left. Quietly. No dramatic exit this time. No loud declarations. Just a tired woman walking down the steps with her pride dented and no one to play along. Since then, things have genuinely changed around here. My parents started asking me before assuming anything about holidays. I get to decide how I want to help, and if I say no, it's no. We've started rotating who hosts the big family events, and the load has been shared more fairly. The Easter chaos was a wake-up call, not just for me, but for my whole family. At the last family barbecue, I wasn't stuck inside trying to teach a toddler how to hold a spoon. I was outside, in a hammock, sipping lemonade with Olivia, sharing headphones, laughing at dumb TikToks and just existing like a regular teenager. Refusing to babysit might seem small. To some people, it's just one event, one decision. But for me, it changed everything. I finally stood up for myself. After years of being expected to bend, to smile, to say yes, I said no. I didn't lose anything worth keeping. I gained something instead: my voice.